I'm Owen Bigland. This is the Inside Edge video blog. Okay, we're now into fall, edging into winter 2018. I'm going to break out my crystal ball, even though I really don't have one, and let's forecast where the market's going here into 2019 for the Vancouver real estate market. I'm going to tie it in to some comments that I get on my YouTube channel here. And what I've been blogging about for so many years now, trying to hammer it home to people. And most of my loyal followers get it. The 3,000 followers I've got all kind of want to get ahead. They're kind of in tune with what I'm talking about just forgetting about the short-term noise and the trader mentality. Buy your principal residence. Down the road, if you can, buy a piece of investment property and just keep the damn thing. You've got a long-term need for your principal residence anyways. You need a roof over your head for you and your family. The alternative is to rent, which is nowhere in a city like Vancouver long-term. It's fine for a year or two. But if you're going to stay in a city like Vancouver for more than 5 or 10 years, you better be an owner. Otherwise, you are taking out so much of your future retirement funds just to stay afloat and keep a roof over your head to your landlord. But so many people, and I'm still trying to convert, and I know I convert many of them every single month, still talk about that short-term trader's mindset. And it comes across in some of the comments and questions I get on my YouTube blog. They just cannot get their head around what real estate can do for you over the next 20 or 30 years, and stop looking at real estate as a commodity to trade in and out or time. That's not what it is. This isn't a stock. It's not like buying Johnson & Johnson shares where you can buy it for $6 and sell it for $6 in 3 seconds. Real estate isn't like that. It's expensive to trade in and out of, and it takes a long time. I don't come cheap to sell properties. So let me tie it in to some questions here and why people need to stop focusing on these short-term clouds that are out there, and they will always be out there. Stop focusing on the micro and focus on the macro. Think long-term. Look at the big picture in what real estate can do for you. So here's some questions that I've had on my blog here. I had a guy a couple weeks ago say, this market, and it's overheated, it's going to crash. We all know it's going to crash. I don't, but run-of-the-mill correction for sure. 5, 10, 15, 20%, we're due for one, as I've blogged about many times. But his question was, what would your reaction be to the client you just sold a $1.5 million home for last week, and he calls you up and has to sell it next year and it's only worth 1.3? What would your conversation look like? Well, I'll tell you how my conversation would look like. First off, unless it was some unexpected circumstance, all my clients, I educate them very well before we go in and buy. All my clients, it's my golden rule, 8 to 10 year holding period. So when you buy a house today for $1.5 million, before we pull the trigger on it, you've got an 8 to 10 year holding period, because anything can happen in the short term. Market could go down 20% next year, and that 1.5 is now down to 1.3 or 1.2. So my golden rule that I've always told people is the 8 to 10 year holding period. Unexpected things can happen though. You get a job transfer, you've got health concerns, whatever. But my clients going in know that short term, all bets are off. If you got transferred next year and the market's down 20%, you've got a backup plan. You put a tenant in it, rent it out for a year or 2 years or 3 years, however long it takes, sell the property and make some money on it. It always recovers. But hey, what else can you do? If you buy it for 1.5, you're forced to sell it and can't rent it for 1.3. Well, my clients are well aware of what can happen in the short term. So it's not a conversation I really have to get into with my clients. All my clients go in with a long-term horizon, and that's what it should always be when you're buying your principal residence. Don't treat it like a commodity. You need a roof over your head. The alternative is to rent, and your monthly outlay is almost the same as what it's going to cost to support that mortgage. The tough part, though, is getting the $100,000 or $150,000 down payment, the 20% down. That's the big hurdle you got to get over and get qualified for the mortgage. But look at the big picture and what real estate can do for you in the long term. That's all you need to know. Another question. These same guys will ask me many times. They'll send me articles and links to various economic forecasts, unemployment numbers. I had one guy send me some link that in the next 18 months, 2,000 pre-sale units are going to be coming online. Consumer debt levels are going up. They'll send some stat. And this should spook you, right? You know, you should sell all your properties because 2,000 pre-sale units are coming online and somehow there's going to be a huge glut in inventory and the prices are all going to plummet and I better sell my entire portfolio. Again, you're looking at micro things here. You're letting the tail wag the dog. Now, I'm aware of these things. I'm aware of interest rate hikes. I'm aware of consumer debt levels. These things have been around forever. That's the problem with a lot of these guys that are doing these blogs. They haven't been around for very long. This is all new to them. I've lived through this for over 30 years. I've seen all this stuff come and go. They're all transitory. They come and they go. But there's always dark clouds on the horizon. Always. Never. It's never green lights and sunshine in my 32 years in real estate as an investor and as a realtor. Ever. You would be permanently frozen on the sidelines, and unfortunately some people are. They have been permanently frozen on the sidelines, renting, paying $3,000 a month or $3,500 a month for a two-bedroom, waiting for some magical time when it's going to be all sunshine and green lights to go. And that is never going to happen, ever. Just like it'll never happen in the stock market. There's always uncertainty there. But these things come and go. Taxes, economy, consumer debt levels. You know, you've got to be aware of these things, but I don't let these things influence my decisions because I have no control over these things. And I've done so many blogs on this and talk about it in my book. You're letting external factors that you have no control over dictate how you're living your life. I've told people before, I've bought real estate in buyer's markets, I've bought lots of real estate in balanced markets, and I've bought lots of real estates in seller's markets where I've had to buy in bidding wars and put money in over asking. Am I concerned that I'm paying too much for these units? No, because I buy them and I'm not looking to sell them in a year or 2 or 3 years. I'm buying investment properties and I'm going to put tenants in them and keep them for 20 or 25 years. Let my tenant pay off the mortgage and then I'll have a look at what the unit's worth. And if I'm slowing down, I'll sell them at that point. And I can tell you that the gains are going to be phenomenal. They are. Real estate will increase to inflation at the very least, not in lockstep. I had a lady that said, I use conservative numbers. You buy a $500,000 condo, studio apartment in Yaletown today, it'll be worth $1 million 15 or 18 years from now. She thought that was outrageous. There's no way. Well, I mean, if you bought real estate in the last 5 years, it's doubled, but that's not going to happen moving forward. 15 to 18 years, you can expect that property to double. Not to mention the fact that your tenant has covered almost all your costs. You've used leverage, you put 20% down, borrowed the other 80, you're supercharging your returns. I talk about a lot of it in my book, but some people just don't want to see where it's at. Another one. Guy sent me another link saying, foreign buyers are to blame for all the price increases we've had here. And foreign buyers, some statistic where foreign buyer buying has dropped 50%. Well, I blogged about this before too. Listen, there are very few buyers triggering that foreign buyer's tax. It's a myth. It was a myth 2 years ago. It was a myth before the foreign buyer's tax came in. Yes, there were a lot of Chinese buyers buying real estate, but the vast majority of them had their Canadian passport or their permanent residency status. Now, all the foreign buyer's tax is done now, which they increased to 20% now, is rather than buy 3 or 4 months before they get their permanent residency or their passports, They'll just wait until they get their PR and then they'll buy, because who's going to trigger the 20%? Nobody is. So foreign buyers dropping 50%. Well, if this year last year you had 50 foreign buyers trigger that tax, and this year you only have 25, yeah, you got a 50% drop in foreign buyers, but that's because the base numbers we're working with are almost nothing. I do straw polls. My office alone does over $1 billion in sales, my MacDonald Realty office. We're just one of 9 offices. We're talking several $100 billion in transactions in the Vancouver Real Estate Board every year. Foreign buyers are not moving the needle whatsoever on that type of volume. I do straw polls. 2.5 years ago, we put on all our contracts of purchase and sale, you have to declare if the buyer and the seller is a foreign buyer for tax reasons. I've never had one. Water cooler talk with my other realtors, nobody's had one. You know, ask yourself this: where are the foreign buyer numbers? When are they going to give us the actual numbers? How many foreign buyers bought in 2018, and how much revenue was collected from the government on the foreign buyers tax? It's a big secret because there aren't any. The other thing is the empty homes tax in Vancouver. I mean, I blogged about it when it was announced that it wasn't going to have a big impact. Some people were saying this is the big one. It's going to cause a flood of thousands and thousands of empty units to hit the MLS, which was crazy. It hasn't. Where are the numbers from City of Vancouver on the empty homes tax? Some people have paid it, but it's not moving the needle on a $200 billion business. It's not. So people have to stop looking at these external factors that really you have no control over and come and go. There are always going to be dark clouds there. Instead, focus on what real estate can do for you in the long term. Buying your principal residence as opposed to renting. Taking advantage of the best tax and the only true tax shelter we get in the principal residence exemption, which I've blogged about many times, has created more millionaires and multimillionaires in this province and in this country than all other sources combined. We don't get much here. The principal residence exemption should be at the top of your priority list if you're a young person watching my blog here, because as you know, renting is a mug's game long term. It's okay short term, 1 or 2 years while you're saving for your down payment, or if you're not sure if you're going to stay in Vancouver, might take a job offer in California or back east, then I would rent. You got to commit 8 to 10 years, or again, have a backup plan where if you do have to move, you can rent the unit out, collect $2,300 a month for the thing. I'll call you up 2 or 3 years later when the market's recovered and we can make you some money on it, and then we'll sell it. So stop focusing on the short term. Listen, real estate is not perfect. I've done so many blogs, the foreign buyers, the taxes. You know, the low interest rates have definitely driven this market up. Markets get ahead of themselves, they do. And we are due for a correction here in the condo market. We've already seen it in the detached market. If that happens later this year, next year, we'll see. So the markets aren't perfect. But do not discount what they can do for you. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Real estate will do some incredible things for you if you just simply buy it and hold it. And tune out these ridiculous bloggers that are throwing out this doom and gloom stuff. You know, before I became a realtor and I was investing in real estate, I paid no attention to any of that stuff. All I did was focus on getting another down payment together and getting qualified for another mortgage. Once I did, I didn't care whether it was a buyer's market, a seller's market, or a balanced market. I had my dad find me a good unit in a neighborhood that I wanted to be in, where I knew I could have a good inventory of good quality tenants, and I pulled the trigger. That's all I kept doing for the last 30 years, and I still do it today. I'll probably be buying in 2019. I would have bought this year too, but I did a reno, and that otherwise I would have bought another unit this year. I just systematically buy, could care less if the market's up, down, or sideways. because I'm not looking to sell this in a year or two. And I think I blogged about it finally here. I told you guys I did an inventory of all the units I've bought, townhomes, detached homes, condos, over the last close to 30 years. And I can tell you half of all the units I have bought over the years, or detached homes or townhomes, have been worth less than what I paid for them at some time after I bought it. Now, usually it was within the first 2 or 3 years, because that's usually when a correction happens. It's short term. That's why I always use the golden rule, my golden rule of 8 to 10 years. After 10 years, chances are, first off, you paid a huge chunk off the principal by that time anyways, and now your amortization tables are kicking into gear now, and you're starting to chip off a lot more principal on your monthly payment. But I think the longest time I had where I had a unit underwater, I think, was about 6.5 years. Where after 6.5 years, I would basically break even. It was a townhouse in Richmond. But after 10 years, and then the other half of the units have gone up right from day one. Never been underwater on them. But half of the units I've had have been worth less than what I paid for them at some time, usually within the first 1 to 6 years. So remember that. It's going to happen. If you want to be a market timer and wait for this correction when it does come, that's cool with me too. Call me. I'm just telling you that you'd probably be better off just pulling the trigger now if you can comfortably afford it and you find the right unit. Because hopefully you're going to follow my rule and you're going to either put a tenant in there for the long term, or you're going to be living in it as your principal residence. So it's not going to make a whole lot of difference 20 or 25 years down the road. As a matter of fact, I always tell people you're going to look back on it 20 or 25 years from now and say, damn, I wish I would have bought 2 of those units. Focus on the long term, the big picture here, and start to get your mind away from all this negativity, these short-term things that people are bombarding you with. Condos, pre-sale condos flooding the market. Interest rate hikes. Yeah, you want to be aware of these things. But don't be frozen on the sidelines, because I can tell you these things are never going to end. There'll always be something else down the road. Because I've been doing this for a long time, and I don't remember a time when I ever pulled the trigger on a purchase where there wasn't something that people were telling me you're crazy to be buying. Don't you know this is going to happen, this is going to happen, that's going to happen? It doesn't matter if you're an investor, because it's long term. Or you're buying your principal residence, which again should be long term. And that's all that should matter. I'm Owen Bigland. As always, if you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, please do. I'll see you next week.